5 Live Formula One.
Springtime at Suzuka wasn't the sensation that we all hoped for, but it gave the Honda Red Bull team a precious 1-2 with Max Verstappen winning his third race this season. Kelsa Breeze. I'm Jenny Gow. Alongside me is Harry Benjamin and Alice Powell. Harry, red flag at the start, but apart from that, it went exactly to plan for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, couldn't have gone more perfect for the reigning champion. Back on the top step, of course, after the uncharacteristic retirement for Verstappen last time around in Australia. He put that right in Japan, winning that race. And from the beginning of the weekend, he just looked dominant on top of it. They didn't have any threats from behind. Perez was close, but not too close. He was just the right amount of speed slower than Verstappen to make sure they could lock out a 1-2 finish with no horror shows from them, and to keep the strategy in touch, because it was a really tire strategic race to keep on top of, and there was challenge from the Ferraris behind, but ultimately it wasn't enough to interfere with Red Bull's 1-2, and they make it another lockout. It's impressive stuff, continues to be so.
21 points at the top of the standings between them and their closest rivals, which is Ferrari. And at the top of the drivers' standings, of course, Max Verstappen now leads the way. He's increased that 4-point gap to a 13-point gap ahead of Sergio Perez, who creeps up to second place. And Alice, what were your thoughts on that race? I just want to know as a whole. Be honest.
To be honest,
Exactly.
I mean, we had some close battles throughout the field, but we want a battle for the win. You know, I certainly do. Anyway, I don't know about you two and everybody else,
Yes.
but I certainly would love, a close battle for the win, and those are always the most exciting. We were spoilt with the Hamilton Verstappen, and I'd love for those days to come back, but we haven't got it, so we've got to make the most of what we've got, and it could have certainly been a lot worse. The race. I'm not saying it was a terrible race, but I always try and be positive. We had a nice battle, didn't we, between Alonso, Russell, Piastri. Hamilton was joining in the mix there at the end, and that sort of kept us on our toes by the end of the race.
You know where you're at, though, when you're talking tyres before the race starts, and that
dominates.
I'm falling
asleep now. I'm done.
The kind of race it is. And look, it's an interesting strategy, of course it is. And Leclerc, ran really long on his medium compounder tyres, but that's not selling it massively for us and for everybody listening in. Formula One, ultimately, at the moment, it comes down to these ground effect regulations coming in 2022, encouraged to create better racing, to try and reduce the dirty air that falls off the back of the car and means that previously drivers haven't been able to get close to the car in front of them to make a move. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked. Statistically, the field may well have closed up from P1 to P20, but we're not getting the racing that we all want. We're not getting the racing that we know these drivers are capable of, and that ultimately is a failure of the regulations.
Don't worry, though, because this podcast will be standout. This will be the one that you've waited for, and we will talk about lots of different things, including Tsunoda, who got 1 point, and of course that big crash at the beginning with Ricciardo and Albon and the fallout from that. So don't go anywhere. But first of all, let's hear our winner. It is Max Verstappen.
Hey Max, congratulations on the win. How satisfying is it to have a really complete weekend, really, where you've kind of gone through it after a very difficult, obviously, race in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we had a little hiccup in Melbourne, but then, of course, it's very nice to come back here and, just basically have a perfect weekend. The car was a bit of a question mark going into the race, but I think we made the right calls before we went into qualifying, because it definitely helped the car also today. And that's why I think I could just push a little bit more, feel a little bit more comfortable with the balance of the car, and basically on every compound, every fuel load, from the start to the end of the race, I just felt good in the car.
Does it feel like the rest of the field though is starting to breathe down your necks a little bit more? Does it feel like the gap is closing?
I think it just depends a bit on the track layout, and of course it also depends on how well you do your job. Every single weekend it's never 100%. Sometimes it's a bit hit and miss for everyone. And of course, if you miss it on a weekend where you are anyway already maybe not in, let's say the favorite layout of your car, then of course other people can be stronger or can be very close.
Harry, an interesting point in commentary. You said, is he flexing his muscles? Is he getting the most out of that Red Bull? And I think we all know the answer to that, don't we? Despite the fact that he got the win, pole, fastest lap, the whole boot.
The Grand Slam's easy for him. We said this last year as well. Is he getting the most out of that Red Bull? Not that he's unable to, but is he actually pushing it to its full extreme? Does he need to? You know, he can put in a couple of full 100% laps to get that fastest lap, but actually there's no need for him to be going flat out, because he can still be incredibly fast and quicker than everybody else without putting his foot all the way to the floor. And that ultimately is amazing from him as a skill set point of view, but also once again Adrian Newey and the team at Red Bull providing not only one of the most successful cars of all time, well, last year, and this follow-up, I'm sure, will go on to, if not eclipse, at least match what last year's offering achieved. But it's just, we've not seen dominance like it before, and it will continue this way for the rest of the season.
What about Perez? He was second, of course. 12 seconds, just over 12 seconds, the gap between him and Verstappen. Did he do enough for you?
Yeah, he basically did exactly what Red Bull would have wanted, and that was to make sure he backs up Max Verstappen. They had a clean run into the first corner, no contact was made. Obviously, that stems to both drivers behaving. Max got the better start anyway, but 12.5 seconds behind. He was there ready to essentially cover any threat. It can make it tricky if if you're a team that's got two drivers that are on the same pace, and we've seen it before with Mercedes with Hamilton and Rosberg, and then the fallout, and then you have the risk of crashing. So for Red Bull, it's ideal that this weekend, certainly for Perez, he was about just over half a tenth behind in qualifying, and he was there to come home. In terms of performance-wise for Perez, he would, of course, want to be closer. He's still, 12 seconds is a long time in a racing sense. Okay, it's a Grand Prix, but still, it's a long way behind.
Interestingly, in the pre-race podcast that we did on Thursday, I think both Rebecca Clancy and Jolyon Palmer suggested that Red Bull should just throw the dice and put an A-lister in that car alongside Max Verstappen. What do you think? Do you agree with that? And who would you put in if you agree?
I mean, I would love to see that. I would love to see, let's say, Alonso chucked into that seat for next year, regarded as one of the best drivers that we've seen. Hamilton would have been another one I'd love to put there, but obviously he's off to Ferrari. But will Red Bull want to risk that? Because let's say Alonso goes to Red Bull next year, okay? He is going to be like, right, I want to win races. I want to win another championship. I want to prove to everyone that there's life in the old dog yet. He's not going to really want to be like, yeah, don't worry, I'll back up Max Verstappen. He's not going to do that, is he, Harry?
No, I mean, I'd love to see it. We'd all love to see two drivers fighting it out, Senna Prost style and even Rosberg Hamilton style, most recently. And that makes people rise up on the edge of their seat, and it pushes drivers and teams to the absolute maximum. You get brilliant racing and a reason to tune in, week out, and you need that, especially when you're adding more and more races throughout a season. Thing is, though, I mean, who's on the market? Alonso is. Carlos Sainz, of course, is on the market as well. Are you going to put them alongside Verstappen? Is Verstappen going to stay in that team? Because if he does stay in that team, he does have a contract. He has been made their star driver. Everything they do is for him and for his benefit. He is that team. He's got it wrapped around his finger. And the power that he and his father, Jos Verstappen, hold is massive. If you want to throw in a Carlos Sainz or a Fernando Alonso, who I don't think either of those drivers would want to settle for what Sergio Perez has done and be that number two driver. They're too good to be a number two driver, in my opinion. But they will cause trouble. Alonso certainly, Sainz, and don't forget he has got quite a large personality with his father, Carlos Sainz Sr. Sainz and Verstappen were teammates at Toro Rosso when they both came into Formula One together, and there were fireworks between them then, and that was when they were racing over 9th and 10th. What's it going to be like if they end up racing for a race win? I think Verstappen wouldn't allow for another top A-list driver to come into that second seat.
What a shame, because I think that would be the challenge that everyone wants, to push Verstappen to getting the most out of his car, to getting the most out of himself. Alice.
Unless Max isn't at Red Bull next year.
Well,
who knows? I'm just chucking it in there before everyone goes, no, don't be stupid.
I love chucking it in there. That's fine.
that is the other thing to monitor. Of course, there is a huge political situation going on at Red Bull behind the scenes. The other thing to note is if they do sign an Alonso, a Sainz, somebody else, they are once again undermining their junior program. The last time they had the opportunity to sign Fernando Alonso several years ago, instead they went for the Russian driver Daniil Kvyat. Why would you sign Alonso over a driver like Kvyat? Yeah, Kvyat was all right, but he wasn't an Alonso standard, certainly wasn't a Verstappen standard. They're undermining their junior program, which has so far been one of the best in Formula One. They've provided so many opportunities for drivers in Formula One. So if you put an Alonso in his 40s, yes, still got it, still absolutely brilliant. But what does that say for the Red Bull team as a whole when you've got Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, you've got Liam Lawson, Ayumu Iwasa all on the sidelines waiting for their chance, when historically Red Bull are happy to give their junior drivers a chance? This kind of then is a bit...
Hasn't that already been done by bringing in Perez in the first place?
Well, because they tried Gasly, didn't work. They tried Albon, didn't work. So arguably, yes, have they already undermined it because they didn't give Gasly...
is working, though.
Well, they didn't give Gasly and Albon enough time either.
Exactly.
Look, I think, of course, if they put Sainz in that seat, technically, that wouldn't be undermining their programme because he was, of course, brought into Formula One by Red Bull. So maybe this is all full circle and Sainz ends up in that second seat. I think we'd all love a top-tier driver.
He'll be in there.
That.
Sargent, I can see it.
No, because Albon will get there first. Right,
Teams don't want fireworks
let's
anymore.
move it on to Sainz, because Sainz finished in third place. Let's hear from him.
Hey Carlos, a heck of a fight back in it. Great to see you back on the podium. You must be delighted with the result and the way that you performed and the car performed here today.
Yes, it was a very strong race. It wasn't easy, very strategic, a lot of things going on with tire degradation. 1 stops, 2 stops, whether to use the new, the used medium at the restart. Anyway, I think we nailed a very good race with some good overtakes at the end. At one point in the race, I thought it was not going to happen, the podium, but then in the last stint, when I put the new hard, the tire gave me a really good feeling and I could push on it and get back to it.
It's another very different track where this Ferraris look strong. Does that bode well for the next couple of hours? You keep going to very different tracks?
Stronger, yes. Still not at the level of Red Bull. I think Red Bull have the upper hand in this kind of track. But encouraged to see that even we had low deck in a high deck track and we could control the tires and we could put ourselves in a position to do some strategic variability compared to the others, and things that last year we couldn't do, so encouraged by that.
So Sainz finishing in third place. I've been stunned by what he's been able to achieve this season alone, but also post-surgery.
He's done a great job. I mean, his comeback in Australia, okay, he had a helping hand with Max Verstappen not finishing the race and retiring early on, but he struggled, didn't he, at the Australian Grand Prix? He even said in the first few practice sessions it was actually quite sore, and he struggled to get out the car at the end of the Grand Prix. It's a lot of strain through your body when you're fit and healthy, and when post surgery, as you said, Jenny. That's hard work. He's not been able to lift the heavy weights in the gym. I know he was cycling the track on Thursday night just to try and boost his cardio up a little bit. But no, he's done a great job. You could say, but the pressure's off him. Where essentially it is. But he still wants to perform, enable it, to make himself even hotter property.
That's interesting you say the pressure's off him. For me, I would think the pressure's on him because he's not got a seat. He's not got any confirmation of where he's going to race next year. He needs to shine brighter than he's ever shone before.
Well, I think I'm looking at it from a sense that, let's say that Ferrari, weren't sure which driver they were going to get rid of, essentially, or continue to sign. They've done that decision. They've made that decision. He's not needed at Ferrari anymore. So from a Carlos Sainz point of view, if I was him, I'd be there going, right, I'll give you plenty of reasons now why you should have kept me and got rid of old Charles there in the corner. So in a sense, he is obviously under pressure in terms of that he's without a seat, but he's probably not really thinking, I desperately need to perform to get a seat. He just wants to perform as best as he can, but he probably does want to prove a point to Ferrari saying you got rid of the wrong driver.
it's amazing what being sacked does for a driver, doesn't it? Time and time again, we always see.
Wonder what you're going to say then.
Whenever a driver gets dropped, suddenly their performances on track improve and that pressure is almost lifted. If Sainz had raced in Saudi Arabia, there is a high likelihood that right now he'd probably be second in the Drivers' Championship, or at the very least third. As it stands now, he's fourth, just a few points behind his teammate Leclerc, having missed a Grand Prix. I wonder if there's... the options for Sainz are... He's obviously on the radar at Red Bull, Aston Martin. I don't think he's that high up the list at Mercedes, but I'm sure he's on the list. And then there's a lot of talk about Sauber, who will become Audi in 2026, and he's got a strong link with Audi through his father, who races for that brand in the Rally Championship. But will Audi be competitive quickly enough for Sainz to want to wait around to be that guy? Will he play number 2 at Red Bull? Would he maybe go to Aston Martin? Are any of those options, appealing to him? I know he wants to obviously stay on the grid, and I think there's a high likelihood he obviously will, but there could be an opportunity where there might not be the right option for Sainz to stay on the grid. And then what happens? Does he find himself out of Formula One for a season like some drivers have in the past? We're talking about this in the build-up, and fair play, producer Joe with this shout. I'll give him the credit on that one. Sergio Perez was out of contract in 2020 in the Racing Point, won a race, his stock was at an all-time high. He didn't have a contract for the next year. Red Bull obviously came and swooped him up, and he remained. But you've got to go back maybe to your Damon Hills in his championship-winning year out of contract. And Nigel Mansell won the world title and then didn't really like the offers that were on hand for the following year, and then ended up going to IndyCar in America for a couple of seasons before then coming back to Formula One. I just wonder if maybe we could be in a situation where that may well happen to somebody like Carlos Sainz. If he doesn't feel that there's anything on the grid that's going to give him the opportunity to win races, I don't see Sainz wanting to do what the likes of, a Valtteri Bottas has done or anything like that, staying in Formula One, clinging on, but finishing down in 16th. I don't see that for Sainz. I think he'd rather have a year out of Formula One and reassess his options than settle for a lower team, if that ends up being the case.
What, go rallying with his father?
All that.
Like Kimi Räikkönen all over again.
I don't know whether we want to move on from this point, but I've got something coming back at that. The only issue you have with skipping, the only issue you have skipping is look who you've got coming up through the ranks. Antonelli, Behrman, who else could we chuck in to the mix there? There's
a Zane Maloney who's currently leading the championship in Formula 2.
From Barbados. You've got Victor Martins as well, the French driver, Pourchaire, Drogovic. We've just listed off 6 drivers there. They'll be at the door waiting for any opportunity of a driver. So I don't see it being the right option. I don't think he would want to miss a year out, because they'd be like, okay, well we'll probably take Ollie Behrman, who's already had a race. He's done a good job, a young driver, sort of got some cheaper, has potentially got backing behind him as well, and he's younger. So that's the risk you take by stepping a year out, and it's not always a good thing, because look at Ricciardo, he's having a bit of a struggle at the moment.
What about Ferrari as a whole? They've improved, haven't they, Harry? To finish third, fourth here at a circuit that wasn't particularly favourable to them?
Yeah, last year, this was one of their worst circuits, exposed all their weaknesses. They were over half a second off the pace. This is a massive improvement for Ferrari. They're still not fully where they want to be. I think this still was a circuit that showcased some of their flaws. And considering, they walk away with a podium and a fourth place finish, I think they'll be absolutely buoyed by this. I think I said it in the coverage, where Ferrari have made such great improvements in a fairly short amount of time. The signing of Fred Vasseur, I think, cannot be underestimated either as team principal. I think we're seeing his processes come to light. They haven't made nearly as many strategy blunders as they have done in the last couple of seasons. They've got 2 drivers fighting fit now who are absolutely, putting that car through all it can be. Yes, there's still a gap to Red Bull, but right now Ferrari are the second best, and this is a crucial time for them to be making those improvements ahead of a big regulation change in 2026, where they'll have a 7-time champion in the car.
And Leclerc was nominated as Driver of the Day today and won that vote. But his strategy, his tyre management, I was really impressed by him today.
He handled those medium tyres so well. I mean, people talk about, well, surely you just sort of lift off, coast around, not as aggressive with the throttle. Yeah, it is kind of as simple as that, but it's really not, especially at a high degradation circuit. He kept himself out of trouble. He's clambered his way all the way up from 8th, eventually finishing in 4th place, and a really good job. And he said after the race that, yes, the result was really good, but we've still got work to do on bringing our tyres in. And over the weekend, they were leaving it slightly late, weren't they, for going out of the pits? And I think that might have hampered him with his qualifying performance yesterday. But yeah, he should be certainly pleased with that result.
Well, let's hear from him.
Hey, Charles, that was a heck of a first stint, and the fans voted you driver of the day today. I know that it wasn't the podium you would have hoped for, but how do you feel after that race?
Well, I mean, if I only look at today, I'm quite happy because I think there was nothing we could have done better. We've done a great race today. I think we didn't have a better result, mostly because of the qualifying yesterday, and this is where I want to focus, which is strange. In the past, I never had to really focus on qualifying because that was one of our strengths. But since two races, it's not really the performance in itself, it's just putting the tyres in the right window, and I've been struggling a bit more than normally, which is normally my strength, and I'm paying the price today in the race by starting further away. But apart from that, the pace has been really, really good. Time management has been really, really good. Communication and strategy has been really, really good. So it's also good to be voted driver of the day. Sometimes you do great races, but you are a bit on your own and nobody notices it. Today I'm happy that people noticed it, and we'll focus on the next race to try and put everything together and to finally have the result that we want.
Did you start to kind of get an idea maybe yesterday after qualifying as to maybe where you're struggling, or is it a bit more in-depth you need to do over the next couple of days and weeks to understand?
We need to go a bit more in-depth in the next couple of days before China. It's very slight differences on the outlap that just then you get less grip on the push lap because again, as I said yesterday, the lap was good, setup was good, just not enough grip. So normally this has been the strength in the past, but since two races it's not. So it's time to focus on that and to hopefully put everything together starting from China.
That was Charles Leclerc, who finished in 4th place. Still to come, we'll hear from Yuki Tsunoda and talk about that crash at the beginning of the race. So that's your top 4, but in 5th place, it was Lando Norris. And let's speak about the McLarens quickly, because Norris did hold on to 5th. Piastri, his teammate, in 8th place, and he made a bit of a meal of today, Alice.
Yeah, didn't have the best of days, did he? I mean, Lando, he did a great job trying to challenge for that, okay, you could say third spot in the end, but the McLaren just really dropped off on the hard tyres. But Piastri, he's been struggling for a little bit, hasn't he? Well, since he's come into Formula One, his one-lap pace is pretty good. I think it's there, if not sometimes better than Norris at times. But yeah, his tyre management, he's struggling with dealing with those Pirellis, and then eventually having a nice battle between Alonso and Russell. He made a small mistake going into the chicane, just sort of approaching the final lap, a little lock up there, and that allowed Russell to swoop round the outside going into turn 1. So I'm sure, well, I know that Oscar will be disappointed with that.
Should he be doing better by now, Harry?
That's the question.
I've been quite impressed by him.
So have I. And look, he's a brilliant driver. You don't win Formula Renault, Formula 3, Formula 2 back to back, and you don't have teams fighting to keep you contracted to them, taking it to the courts without being a pretty decent peddler. And I don't think we're there yet to discuss quite Piastri, and where he's at the moment. But I don't think we're far off, and we're getting to a point where the last couple of races he's had to move out of the way for Norris. But sometimes it's due to strategy and Piastri just not being there. But the one thing that is Piastri's Achilles heel at the moment, it seems, is tyre deg and race management, and he needs to get on top of that sooner rather than later. There's no doubt his speed in that car, but we all thought I think I did, that he'd be closer to Norris by now, and I think that rate of improvement needs to be scaled up now. Because otherwise he's going to be the number 2 in that team. Whereas right now I think everyone's kind of judging them on an even keel. Yes, Norris has way more experience, but with the amount he was rated coming into this, I think Piastri's performances should be better than they currently have been.
Fernando Alonso finished in 6th place, and I love that battle for 6th. And yes, it was a battle for 6th and not the lead, but if it had been the lead, it would have been the race of the decade, maybe. I'm over-egging that. But Alonso versus Russell versus Piastri, Hamilton tagging on at the end of that as well. And Alonso is just so clever. He got penalised for it last time, but there was no penalty this time. He was... Just tell us why it was a display of wizardry almost.
He's a wily old fox, isn't he? Is Fernando Alonso. I think genuinely he definitely was struggling with his tyres and with his pace, but he was obviously aware, because you can see it in the mirrors, that Russell would have been catching Piastri. Piastri was obviously attacking Alonso. And I seem to think, just looking and going through the lap times, that Alonso probably thought, right, well, I'll be smart on where I'm going to get my exits. There's only one DRS zone, and that's down the main straight. The detection for there is on the exit of turn 15, which is 130R. As long as I get my exit there, which he was doing, and you mentioned this in commentary, Jenny, for many, many laps. And then eventually he just thought, well, Russell's catching, so I'm just going to back Russell up. We know Russell's pace. I'm sure the engineers would have told him, okay, Russell's approaching. And basically what he essentially did was backed Piastri up into Russell. They started having a good old scrap, and then that eased the pressure off Alonso. He was struggling with his tyres, so I don't think he had a great deal of pace left anyway. His time sort of did slightly improve. I think actually he set a personal best at the end of that race, if I'm saying that correctly. So he still had a little bit of room in the tyres there, but he's just clever with how he gets himself out of situations. Okay, in Australia that wasn't the best. That was a bit too much. If I'm being honest, clever but too much. But no, this one was absolutely spot on.
And what about his teammates, Aston Martin? Lance Stroll finished 12th. And you've already pointed out, Harry, and we understand now that the top 5 teams should occupy the top 10 finishing places if all goes to plan. And Stroll should be finishing in that top 10 consecutively. And once again, he's finished in 12th place.
Qualified 16th. Alonso was 5th. And look, Fernando Alonso is Fernando Alonso. Let's not underestimate that. But he is absolutely wiping the floor, and then some once again with Lance Stroll. And Stroll, you don't get pole positions. You don't get on the podium in Formula One if you're a bad driver. He's a decent peddler. But if he were any other driver, he would not still be in Formula One right now based on his last few years of performance. He's only in that team, and we all know why. It's because his father owns the team and runs the team. However, surely there's got to be the conversation at some stage, unless he dramatically picks up performance. And even with an upgrade this weekend, he didn't have the pace advantage within himself. He said that in his interviews. And you have to wonder, how long can he go on within himself doing this and being absolutely beaten every time? But Aston Martin lost out on a top 3 position in the Constructors' Championship last year because they only had one man scoring the points. At the moment, okay, Stroll's picked up a few points here and there, but he's not putting his weight in that team. Fernando Alonso is once again carrying it. If Aston Martin want to become a serious threat in Formula One, they have the facilities and the money to do it. They need a second driver. Well, first of all, they need to hold on to Fernando Alonso. Then they need a second driver who is capable at scoring points and banking them. They get Honda power units in 2026. I would like to make the case for Yuki Tsunoda. If he's not rated in Red Bull to be promoted or to even stay in that RBC, at the moment he's trouncing Daniel Ricciardo. Tsunoda, okay, I don't think he's a world championship driver, but if he'd been in that second Aston Martin, he would have banked more points than Lance Stroll has so far.
Yeah, or Sainz. I agree with your point.
Or Sainz, yes. But the Honda link with Tsunoda is my sort of reasoning for that one.
Yeah. I agree with your point, but I just can't see him taking his son out of that seat.
But if he ever wants to be... his son is not going to be a world champion. And that was the reason that he sort of put so much money into him. He wanted Lance Stroll to be a world champion. That is not going to happen. Surely the next stop is to make Aston Martin world championships. And okay, one day, let's say they have a great car. Fernando Alonso wins the Drivers' World Championship for Aston Martin. Aston Martin still ain't winning the Constructors' Championship unless he has a season like Max Verstappen has had in the last year. They also, the other thing, which may soften the blow slightly if they want to kind of gently ease your son out of an F1 seat, is they have a rather plum hypercar seat in the World Endurance Championship, which is coming along nicely, and that is a championship that is about to enter a golden era of racing. Maybe Stroll might end up there, still within the Aston Martin family, still racing, but yeah, and they might word that so it's his decision to go. But I just don't think, from a business perspective, you can carry on like that.
Maybe, but if it's making money, I feel like he's a businessman, isn't he? He's not there to just be like, he wants his son to do well. He's obviously bought probably Alonso in just, it's going to bring money in. It's going to sell the hat, sell the t-shirt. It's going to bring money in. It's going to help with the car performance. But I think ultimately it'll be, Lance's decision in the end that goes, you know what, Dad, I don't quite fancy doing this. Can we go and do this instead? Then he'll go, yeah, okay. So I think it'll be more of a Lance decision, because obviously Lawrence wants the team to do well, but I think he's a businessman at the end of the day. He wants to try and make some money. He's built that spectacular factory, and if eventually he can sell that on, that's going to be worth a lot of money.
I mean, Aston Martin currently sit 5th in the constructors' standings, just 1 point behind Mercedes.
And they could be ahead of them.
Yeah. Mercedes, let's move that conversation on. Russell finished in P7, Hamilton in P9. Fairly unremarkable weekend for them, I have to say. But let's focus on P10, because that was homeboy Yuki Tsunoda who got the point that wins prizes at the end of the season, Alice. Good job for him.
I mean, he did a great job. He'll be really, really pleased with that point. Okay, people say, well, it's only P10, but vital point, as you say, in front of his home crowd. And when he was making overtake after overtake coming back through, the grandstands were up cheering, all on their feet. A round of applause for Yuki Tsunoda. So always special racing at your home Grand Prix, and when you get success, albeit a point, but that's roughly sort of where they are at the moment. He'll be pleased.
Yep, let's hear from him now.
Well, congratulations, a point on home soil. Just tell me how great that feels.
Yeah, relieved. I would say after I lost a couple of positions in the first start, I felt a little bit of disappointment for sure, but at the same time, had a good start after that. And I think one of the big highlights was the pit stop. Our team did a fantastic job, mechanics. That's very fast pit stop, and it overtook 2 cars. That's insane. So without that, I would be a lot more difficult to score points today. So big credit to the team, and obviously able to score in the points in front of Japanese fans finally. They're very happy.
You pulled off some incredible moves through the S's as well. It just looked like today you were operating at one of your highest levels. Did you feel at one with the car?
Yeah, definitely. Feeling confidence. I knew that straight line speed is not that competitive compared to other cars, and I knew other cars had a better straight line speed. But at the same time, we know we had a lot of downforce, and the only chance we have is S's that we normally affected by downforce. So I tried my best, and I did a couple of good overtakes, and I definitely enjoyed that.
So a precious point for Tsunoda. You're tipping him to go into the Aston Martin. I don't see that coming, but maybe you know something more than I do, Harry.
Probably not.
Unlikely, he says. We need to focus on that crash just quickly, because it was good for RB that they got Tsunoda in the points, but bad with Ricciardo crashing out in lap 1 with Alexander Albon, and let's face it, Williams did not need that either. So can you just talk us through what happened?
Yeah, well, it was lap 1 of the start of the race, and making their way through turns 1 and 2, double right-hander downhill, and then approaching the first left-hander, turn 3, Ricciardo in front of Albon, and as he goes to turn left, he almost runs out to the right-hand side of the track to widen the line, and in doing so, he meets the front end of Alex Albon. There's contact, and they both go spearing off into the tyre barrier and the gravel. Both drivers out of the car and okay, but both with fairly heavy hits. And for those teams in the bottom 5, especially of the constructors, points are not only a premium, so are spare parts. We've already documented a lot about the chassis and the spare parts situation at Williams. I was almost thinking about Logan Sargent and during the red flag, don't get out of that car. They might put Albon in it. So thankfully, Sargent managed to finish that race, but also he had an off as well. Didn't look like there was any too much damage done to that Williams, but under a cost cap era, these are tough times for those teams, and Williams are going to be a little bit worried, I think, going into the next race in China. They don't have a spare chassis until Miami, I believe. So that's the next race on after China. So tough day at the office for them. On the RB front, it's a shame for Ricciardo because he was actually showing improved performance here in comparison to Tsunoda. So to not get the chance to fight for points and see what he can do under this increased pressure for that seat he's under is a shame, and one that he will be thinking about. Shout out to the RB team. Incredible work, not only from Tsunoda in the driving seat, but from the team in the pit stops. He came in with a gaggle of cars in the second part of that field. He was down in, I think, 13th, 14th, and due to the quick pit stop, catapulted him up the order. Fantastic work and showing how Formula One is properly a team sport. So well done then, and a crucial point cements them 6th in the constructors.
And we've just heard from the stewards, no further action for that first lap incident between the two of them because it was the first lap. Interestingly, Toto Wolff has put a spanner in the works, and he's been saying to the media that he thinks there will be significant driver movement in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, that's exciting. I mean, yeah, they're probably, as we've been already touched on, Sainz is definitely one of the drivers that's got to move on from Ferrari. So we'll keep an eye on that then.
Do you see him at Mercedes?
Could see him there. Yeah, I could possibly. I mean,
Harry,
Antonelli is one of those. Antonelli is one of those.
I'm thinking about it. I think Sainz could be an option there, because why would Alonso go to another team that's currently performing worse than the one that he's already at? They put Sainz in the second seat of Mercedes. Antonelli is at Williams for a few years, like Russell was.
Okay, job done. I would like to know who your driver of the day was, please, Harry Benjamin.
Outside of Max Verstappen, who performed absolutely phenomenally once again, I am going to go with the fans' votes, Charles Leclerc, for that excellent stint on the tyres and playing the team game to let Sainz through for the podium.
He stole my driver of the day. That was mine. Do I have to go for somebody else?
No.
No? Okay, well, Charles Leclerc then. For that reason.
I'd definitely go with Charles Leclerc.
No Tsunoda in the field then? Point at home?
I'd give
Tsunoda's
him an admiral mention, but not a...
Tsunoda did a good job. His pit crew did a great job for jumping him forward. So maybe we don't have a driver of the day. We have a team of the day.
Pit crew of the day.
Pit crew of the day. Oh, that's a nice one. Pit crew of the day, RB.
Yeah, there we go.
Might not have been the fastest, but when it counted, that's what they did. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us again for China. 2 weeks' time, we'll bring you all of the action. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.